Greetings and welcome to the Saroth Magick experiment. I'm sorry the link I posted is not the link that I'm using. It's beyond my ken. So, can you hear that music okay, guys? What does that sound like on your end? Can you hear me okay? How does it sound? Bass, yeah? Okay. Can you hear my voice okay? Okay. Well, that is the amazing Qbird app where you can basically just, it's just like a little oscillator keyboard thing, and it's very good. I must recommend it to the massive audience that I have. I'll just put on my Spuglicious. Do you guys have a shop called Flying Tiger in America or Australia? These glasses were like £3. They're totally plastic, but Jen Bloomgren, which methods of divination would you? If you're blind, I would possibly suggest yarrow sticks with the I Ching, because then you wouldn't really need to. But then, how would you look up their associations? Jem Bloomgren. Yeah, it's very popular in Europe, here where we're a little bit more advanced than you North Americans culturally. So, I'm not just fucking about here tonight, guys. What I actually want to talk about is addiction to drugs, and addiction to magic, and addiction to our weird forms of deluding ourselves that we're in some kind of spiritual web or something. I don't know. I am really struggling as Saroth the Mage to be magical. And it's been and I've realized through reading a book called Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. I presume Philip and Ben and Baz have heard of this chap, Robert Anton Wilson. He was I think he wrote for Playboy. He was even a Playboy editor in the early 70s. He was very much a product of the 60s baby boomer generation. He was an advocate of LSD and pot, and as am I. I would have no problem in advocating mind expanding drugs. The only drugs I would not recommend are the ones that I ended up getting addicted to. And the very fact that you can get physically addicted to a drug would tell you it's a no-no. Don't go there. Don't go there. So yeah. So in my whole magical career, I have struggled against the idea of supernaturalism, and that things, I see a lot of, especially the YouTube and the social media guys, and these are the guys with the big. Perhaps R.A.W was a panpsychist. Yeah, well, he was definitely more into the idea of brain change, like neurological brain change, than he was a dedicated esotericist or magician. Magic for him was a means to an end, but I think for some of us, it's become like a culture and a way of being. And I'm perfectly comfortable being a magician, but I want to see real results, and I don't want to be chasing, rainbows and unrealistic ideas about God and about angels and about demons. And I'll state right out of the gate that I've never really believed that any of these things were anything other than expressions of our own psyches. But as Lon Milo Duquette once said, yeah, the occult is all in your head, but your head is just far bigger than you ever imagined. Yes, he did. Yeah, he wasn't. I'm answering Philip Blair's question there. Did Robert Anton Wilson study psychology, Stoic and/or Buddhic? I would say all of the above, plus a good bit more. He was very into Alistair Crowley, yeah, Alan Watts. He was part of the 6 days consciousness expansion movement. Timothy Leary was one of his good friends. Alan Watts was another friend. William Burroughs was another of his friends. And reading Prometheus Rising recently really I needed an anchor. What he talks about in Prometheus Rising is basically an expansion of Timothy Leary's Hey, out of mind, how's it going? What he talks about in Prometheus Rising is an expansion of Timothy Leary's Eighth Circuit theory of the mind as a kind of, I think he describes it as a biocolloidal computer. I mean, and he makes it very explicit at the start that the map is not the territory. That's Burroughs and all the 1960s gurus had read Alfred Korzybski and his Science, Insanity, and General Semantics and all that. So they knew that people make maps which are incomplete working models of reality, because we can never, and we can never encapsulate reality in a map, because a map is just a working model of how we experience reality. But he breaks it down very beautifully. Hi, Jasmine. Long time no see. What time is it in Scotland? 1 in the morning. The Eighth Circuit, yeah, Baz, it is Neoplatonist. I think anything beyond the Fourth Circuit is Neoplatonist because it suggests a reality that is beyond. But what I like about the Eighth Circuit model is it's scientific-ish. What it postulates is we all have 4 antique circuits, which are like the biosurvival. That's the very first one. Every single living organism has this move towards like nourishing stuff, move away from threatening, dangerous stuff. So that's like your biosurvival. You could call that your root chakra. The second circuit is, let me just jog my memory here. I think it's, see, I'm not at all prepared for this live stream. I hate live streams, but I feel like I've got to force myself to do it. So, yeah. So the first thing he starts with is like the thinker and the prover. The thinker will think, and then your own mind will prove what you're thinking. So if you think, oh, I'm going to have a really shit day today, your prover will prove that you're going to have a really shit day today. If you think of the brain organism in terms of hardware and software, and of course our brains aren't computers, they're far more advanced than computers. I mean, we do like God knows how many calculations a second. We're maybe a bit like quantum computers, from what I understand. So the first circuit is the oral biosurvival circuit. And that's like basically just imprinting on your mother, sucking from the teat. Opiates take you to biosurvival. If you've ever, like, I was in a car crash once, and as the car crash was happening, everything slowed down to like absolutely slow motion. And I think that was to give, the brain has all these clever tricks built in so we can survive these things. Anytime your life's in danger, you skip to the first circuit, biosurvival. And biosurvival anxiety is, most of the world is living in um, survival anxiety because it's come from milk from the mother's teat, and then it gradually expands out into the second circuit, which is your anal, and this is going from Freud and Jung and all that, but your emotional territorial circuit, So you're like a little baby, and all you know is the bliss of your mother's bosom, and then as you're a toddler, you start to explore, you start to realize, that's a bit dangerous. Pecking order, that all comes into it. Uh, the third circuit is the time binding semantic circuit. Time binding is basically a thing that only humans have evolved. So all mammals have the first two circuits, but the third circuit is using symbols and art. Cave paintings are a perfect example of third circuit time binding. It's like leaving a mark so the next generation can learn through your, that's how we um that's how we build on, because when the human species first came into existence, for hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps we really didn't master this idea of time binding. We passed things verbally on to our children, and they would pass them on to their grandchildren. But a far more reliable way is writing it down or recording it in some way. And then you don't need that direct contact between parent, child, grandparent. The wisdom of ages is passed through time binding. And that's another one of Alfred Korzybski's idea. The fourth circuit, and this is, as an adult human being, we all have these four circuits in one way or another. And that's the moral, socio-sexual circuit, which basically, if you think on what really turns you on sexually, and then you think about like how certain little kinks and stuff, how did that get implanted? And it's actually when you are very young, you imprinted sexually on what we have stages of imprint vulnerability. And this is something that I think Freemasonry and magical orders do very well. Like baptism in water, I think originally it was an actual drowning experience. So when you come out of that drowning experience, your first circuit, um, biosurvival security, is threatened. So when you come out, it's like being born again. And this is why I advocate psychedelics and magic and yoga and meditation and breathing techniques and all that, because they are ways to re-imprint these first the four antique circuits, which you all have. But the exciting bit for me is there are another four circuits which we are evolving into. William Burroughs was very about this, Robert Anton Wilson very much so, Timothy Leary, all these guys who basically took a lot of acid in the 60s, experimented with yoga, magic, and then you blow a circuit. And I knew it happened to me when I was very young. I was experimenting with mushrooms when I was like 12, 13 years old, not because I thought it was like yoga or any kind of magic. It was just because our big brothers had told us that you get mushrooms and they make you high, but there was no way to prepare for the kind of altered reality that was stepped into. And they are the higher circuits, the evolving circuits. So Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson postulate that there are 4 new circuits. The 5th is holistic neurosomatic circuit. So it's kind of if you smoke a joint and you feel that pleasurable sort of tingling in your body and sex feels really good, that's a 5th circuit turn on. And I know personally, if I haven't smoked weed for a while and then I have a joint, I kind of had a few minutes of kind of, I'm slightly lost, and I get a little bit paranoid, and I do a sort of life review. That's a higher state of awareness. But of course, if you smoke too much, it kind of nullifies the effect. The 6th circuit is very interesting to me, collective neurogenetic circuit. And this is, I believe, what you reach on low to medium doses of mushrooms, where I don't know what it is about mushrooms, but they always bring up the DNA thing. I don't know if there's any experienced trippers in the live chat, but it always seems to take me to a place where I'm kind of almost from a place of and this is actually the next circuit. I mean, let's make it clear, these circuits are not a hard and fast, okay, you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's soft edges, and the map is not the territory. These are just convenient ways to explain perhaps how our brains can work and how our brains can evolve. You could look at the 10 Sephirah or Sephiroth of the Kabbalah in pretty much the same way. It's just a symbol system, which is third semantic symbol using stuff. Is that making any sense to anyone? So, yes, I noticed there it said, Jasmine Eric said, agreed, Philip Blair. I like Saroth lies. There's an authenticity. There certainly is an authenticity because I am fucking terrible at live streams. I hate live streams. But sometimes, I could make 1,000 videos of Aleister Crowley on this little bit, or William Burroughs talking about this little bit. But I am heading towards a sort of whole theory of magic and the occult, where it's not objective. I sometimes wonder, us magicians, we slag Corey Good and all these guys. I mean, they are outright liars. There's no doubt about that. But the stuff that comes across in the New Age about the objective reality, about reptilians, and I listened to Kerry Cassidy today with a supposed right hand magician. He'd obviously read his theosophy, but none of this stuff is objectively true. Everything is subjective, but being subjective doesn't make it untrue. Our inner programs absolutely dictate how we encounter the world around us. That's one thing we can uh, understand. Oh, Brandon Young. Cliff High was talking about a way to take weed that gets around those negatives. I don't think those negatives are that negative. It's just a little. I think my unstone self is impulsive and stupid and foolhardy. But when I have a joint, I can kind of reassess what I've been doing up to that point. And I must admit, the weed nowadays is just too potent. I got a couple of grams the other week, last weekend actually, and I'd planned to do I'd planned to do a live stream. I'd planned to do all these creative things, and just one joint, and I was just like in a beautiful, pleasant, uh, neurosomatic bliss state. But I couldn't, it's absolutely useless for doing anything practical. Hi, people. Yes, any question for Saroth tonight. And by the way, I got a little bit worried about my drinking after the Lost Word podcast show, because if anybody tunes into that, I am actually so drunk I can't actually talk. I'm making this weird face, and at the end, all you see is my slumped body, and it's that is not the behavior of a magus. And I admit I possibly might have a little bit of what tonight, Scratchy. This is SRD Media. This is one of my boys from Aberdeen. You're welcome anytime, Scratchy. Does Saroth know how much blue divided by Chevy is? What does that even mean, Beeblebrox? Don't hit me with such abstract notions. So, yeah, so what I'm trying to get across is I am an occultist without apology. I was following the Golden Dawn system, self-initiated, admittedly, but I mean, I'd rather be self-initiated than be in the David Griffin Hogwarts Golden Dawn, who have now just pissed all over anything that the good name of the Golden Dawn ever meant. But I am totally skeptical as well because, the woo does get out of control sometimes. And I think that, yeah, I cannot believe in this other dimension where all these gods, demons, angels, and that are just floating about. I do not believe in God. Or if I do believe in God, it's as a kind of very abstract, as Baz and me have talked about lately, the Gnostic God, which would be a very alien God, a God beyond any comprehension. Oh God, there's Zen and explaining esoteric art. So I expect to have no audience. Stick with me, guys. I'm much better than them. So, how do we? God to me is an organizing principle. It's certainly not some kind of human being, a superhuman who can observe our every thought and every deed. That is very primitive. And what I see in the YouTube new left hand path, which someone who Calendal, how's it going, man? Do I think God is like it? Yes, I do. If God had a number, surely it would be zero, but that's quite abstract. What I'm getting at the moment is there is no personal sensor that is, and I think one of the major problems that I hit in my magical practice was I met someone who came into my world through the internet who had a radically different reality tunnel from me. And he told me, and I respected this guy because he just, he he had a lot of I don't know. It's as superficial as he had a lot of subscribers. He had a lot of clout behind him. He knew a lot of very people that I respected in the occult world, and he was like, "No, man. Where do you think the energy from the occult comes? It all comes from God." And I was like, "Shit, what? God? What? But I don't believe in God." Well, try. And my efforts to try to believe in God threw me into a state of cognitive dissonance that hasn't really worn off to this day. But by getting back into real, where I started, like with Robert Anton Wilson, who comes at things from a very psychological, neurological, he's not an expert. He's a very clever dude that took a lot of drugs and made a lot of breakthroughs. And this is one of my main points as well, that yes, you can achieve great things through discipline and asanas and pranayamas and all this kind of yogic stuff. Or, as Terence McKenna said, you can take a huge dose of psilocybin or DMT and you can be right there in the presence of what we call God, which would be the eighth circuit, is the meta programming circuit, which basically means you can we imprint it accidentally. Like there's an example that Robert Wilson puts across in one of his books where a farmer was raising geese, and they know their future sexual partners because they're in the nest with their mother. And I guess humans must be pretty much the same. But accidental imprints can lead to a goose, just a vulnerable moment of imprint, and nobody knows exactly when these times of imprint are. But uh, I hate to use the word primitive cultures, but shall we say shamanic cultures know when the imprint vulnerability is, and they make marks of rites of passage around these. But in Western society, with our godless ways, we just let everything happen accidentally. So I think I was possibly imprinted by the television set or by something, I don't know. But yeah, so there's a story of a goose who sexually bonded to a ping pong ball because in that moment of imprint vulnerability, the ping pong ball was what he saw, and he ended up for the rest of his goosey life trying to make love to ping pong balls. What magic, yoga, the spiritual arts, and the psychedelic, because I honestly think that the history of religion and spirituality is the history of altered states of consciousness. There's no doubt about it to me that did anyone hear the video, the taped video that I did earlier on tonight? Alistair Crowley's introduction to book 4, where he's saying, what did Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, St. Paul all have in common? They were all pretty unexceptional until they went off into the wilderness. They come back and suddenly they've had this revelation. God spoke to them and they start preaching a new way of being, a new law. What this is in Robert Anton Wilson's mind, I'm pretty sure in Aleister Crowley's mind, and in my mind, is they somehow turned on the higher circuits of the brain. Not so much the fifth, because it's like, it's quite easy to turn on through prolonged, tantra or smoking dope. 6, 7, 8, that a lot harder to turn on. But I still say if you take a double, treble, quadruple heroic dose of psilocybin, DMT, you will experience the meta programming level of, Robert Anton Wilson book in Prometheus Rising says the third, you know, toddlers understand language and can manipulate symbol systems. But when you're in that expanded state of consciousness, and I don't want to say, oh, that's number 6 and that's number 7, because I also listen to uh, Kerry Cassidy and Project Camelot, and it was like, oh yeah, so Venus is now going through its 7th revolution, and it's utter bollocks. It's utter subjective nonsense. If it makes sense to you, that's fine. But what I'm saying is there are higher states of consciousness where human language and the symbol systems that we use, i.e., numbers and letters, seem absolutely ridiculous and redundant. But I mean, these are in states where, you couldn't drive a car, you couldn't operate machinery, you're pretty much lying on a floor, if you're lucky, in a temple somewhere. If you're very unlucky, in a back alley somewhere. So set and setting is a lot of what it's about. But I think my basic thrust and what I'm going to be working towards in 2020 with the Saroth the Mage channel is to dispel the supernatural from my magic. I'm not saying that, people that have had clairvoyant experiences and, they've been abducted by UFOs and stuff. It's real to them, but I really think that you know, did anyone else see that spaceship? Did anyone else see the demon that came into your bedroom? It's all in here. But like Lon Milo Duquette says, it's all in your mind, but you just have no idea how big your mind is. Because when we were covering Austin Osman Spare, who you could say is the father of chaos magic, he called Kia this numinous Don Juan, although we might believe he's fictional now, Carlos Castaneda's Don Juan, would class it as the Nahual. It's a subjective thing which is very real to you. And this is what Zen talks about as well with his what does he call it? Bioenergy or something. It's very real to us. And just because other people can't see our hallucinations doesn't mean our hallucinations aren't helpful, as long as they are helpful. So that's why magic and spiritual disciplines kind of get us there. But I do totally believe that, magic plus psychedelics plus sex is more efficient than just magic or just psychedelics or just sex. I'm all for just throwing it all in the massive cauldron. And there are risks. Jim Morrison said drugs are a bet with your mind. I would say they're a bet with your very soul, because I was an eager psychonaut in my early teens, but I ended up a hopeless heroin addict for 20 years. And that's something I've felt like I want to get out, because this kind of, I mean, I never go this close to the camera. I don't know why I want to do, and I think there's been a lot of negative stuff. Um, Basically, ever since that clash of reality tunnels, I was a magician, he was a magician. He had such a completely different concept of magic than I did that it made me think, shit, have I got it so wrong all this time? But no, I hadn't. It's just he's happy there, I'm happy there. Um, so with the heroin, I had been a eager experimenter with all forms of consciousness modulation, shall we say. The first drug I ever took was like speed, just not methamphetamine, but amphetamine sulfate, and I was about 11 years old, you know. And it seemed sad at the time, but I was kind of grown up for 11, and it was the mod thing in Britain. There was a mod revival, and we're all scooting about to Tamla Motown. Great times. But I had a matchbox in my pocket, and when I came out the club, I noticed I'd scraped a hole right through the matchbox. I thought, that's not entirely healthy. But drugs culture in Britain's a far smaller sort of smaller scene than America. I think there's more variety in America. I think British kids in the 80s, when I was growing up, pretty much all did the same thing. So we're all doing speed. We were all doing mushrooms. And little by little, that grew into. There was a club called Fever, which was a very exclusive club in Aberdeen. It was like one of the first acid house clubs that opened up in the northeast of Scotland, and MDMA first came then. And we were all taking MDMA, and it was wonderful. It was shamanic. It was beautiful. There was like soccer casuals meet the gay hairdressing elite. It was a culture clash, like maybe the Greeks and the Egyptians, but we each learned from each other. But then the parties got longer, the drugs got heavier. We formed a band. Um, I don't know if you guys have heard like bands like the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays, but they were very influential for us growing up, like 1920, when that sort of wave hit, where it was like dance music with MDMA, with cocaine, with marijuana. So it's just a big old 1960s rerun for us. And there might be something to be said for the 20-year nostalgia loop, because it would have been 1989. So 20, yeah. So that would work. 20, yeah, 1960. Yeah, so that would totally work. So it was like us. They called it the Summer of Love. I think that was 1988 or 1987 in England, but because we're in the wilds of Scotland, it took a year or two to hit us. But when it did, it seemed to open the doors to all the other drugs. And when I was first introduced to heroin, it was we knew it was heroin. We weren't that stupid, but it's not like you imagine it white powder and you inject it and stuff. It was just like somebody put this brown powder on a bit of tin foil and we inhaled it, and all of a sudden you're feeling like nothing can. That is first circuit bio survival security. It's almost like being back in the womb. Nothing can harm you. You could be on heroin and be in a box and still be reasonably happy and content, because I, I don't know if anyone's tried heroin out there. It's a very, very seductive, uh, dangerous. Never go near heroin, guys. I would pretty much recommend you try cannabis, no, not amphetamines. Well, maybe not methamphetamine, cannabis, any sort of psychedelics, any, especially any natural psychedelic, that is absolutely fine, because it's not going to lead you into any trouble. You know, human primates have been taking these substances for thousands of years, as we have opium. But the very first time I was in a band by the would kind of splintered off from the fever scene, and we made a little band. Two of the guys in the band, one of them was a heroin addict. Well, two of them were a heroin addict. One of them was actually like his dad was an armed robber, and he was getting heroin up from a city in England, and you'd literally come to practice room with it like a bag of sugar full of heroin. And me and my friends were never really as heavy in it as these two guys. But after the first night I tried it, I had this terrible feeling that it was like, and I remember it to this day. It just felt like there was I think I've mentioned this before, but it was like I felt like there was a latent possibility for addiction, which to me was symbolized by like a snake curled up in my stomach. And I went to the practice room the next day and said, guys, I feel like this stuff's still in me, and it's like a serpent. And I was quite occulty even then. The band was called 13 after the 13th uh, major atu of the tarot card, death. You know, it was like death and rebirth, the positive side of death. And they totally laughed at me and said, "Ah, no, it wears off after 8 hours. You're tripping." But my slide in addiction was slow, but irrevocable. So it took, a good few months, 18 months to 2 years for me to have my first taste of smoking heroin off tinfoil, to actually get to the point where me and my girlfriend just were wanting it every day, because it flattens everything out. It's a good day if you get your drugs, and it's a very bumpy day if you don't get it, and everything would be blissful. And we hadn't taken the massive, nosedive that addicts invariably do. So we had a decent standard of living. We had a nice flat. We had good friends. We were partying all the time. And it just seemed like the best years of our life. Only later did it really start to take a heavy toll. So I'm just rubbing. I just really wanted to connect with, I'm still alive, and I am still trying to have ideas, but I do find uh, live streaming difficult. But then I can't get across ideas in these little videos when I'm just reading other people's stuff. That's not particularly interesting either. Ecstasy finished the football casual movement. Exactly, Johnny Seven. Are you from the UK? Because only someone from the UK would have that insight that ecstasy absolutely killed the football casual movement, because I was kind of on the outskirts of that movement. I never used to go to games, because me and my friends used to prefer to stay in the pub and get drunk and get wasted. But we used to meet all the guys when they came back. And the guy that introduced me to heroin was a hardcore Aberdeen soccer casual. And it was really like a cult, like the sort of skinhead thing, working classness, although a lot of the soccer casuals were upper working class or even middle class. It was all about the clothes. There's two strands in youth culture in Britain. There's the sort of mod culture, which it tends to be working class, where you want to stay neat and clean. Clean living under difficult circumstances is one way of describing mod culture. And then the more, oh, really, Johnny? You're from Scotland as well? Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, Leyland Scott jumpers, Pringle jumpers, uh, oddball jeans with slits up the side. Oh man, I love that. And we used to shoplift a massive amount of clothes. We used to go to the shop pairs, boxer jumpers, beautiful wool jumpers. Like at that time, they were like 100 and odd quid. And we just used to pretty much take two into the changing room, tie one round your waist, take the other one out, walk out. Simple. I hope I'm not going to get arrested after the stream for confessing to prior crimes, but I was about 15 at the time, and I'm now 51. Stone Island, yeah. Oh God, the people still wear stone. Where are you from, Johnny Seven? So we're getting a bit off topic here. So yeah, addiction and this crisis that I keep going through with magic of thinking, okay, how can magic possibly work if I don't believe in God? I don't really believe in outside spiritual agencies. Ayrshire, cool. Nice to meet you, Johnny Seven. I've seen you in chat loads of times and all the, I guess you would call us the Dank Alliance. And congratulations, Philip Blair. You're really very active, and I would be honored to consider myself as part of the Dank Alliance. And it's not like we're totally wanting to diss people or rip people to bits. It's just we want some reality to our spiritual growth and stuff. MDMA is absolutely fantastic. I can't help thinking that if some of what who's this? Mark the Shark. Hey, Saroth, on your path of initiation video, will there be more cards featured? Ah, gosh, I haven't done a tarot card thing for a long time. I actually, on my WordPress blog, wrote out almost every one of them. But I just, it's like, are people going to be interested in my, and my thoughts have moved on. I mean, I wrote those a long time ago, 5 or 6 years ago. So my ideas on the tarot cards have changed. So can I just update it or will I have to rewrite the whole thing? It's tricky. So yeah, so where I'm at just now is that magic is primarily a tool for opening these four, five, six, whatever, higher future circuits in the brain. Very few people have, opened the meta programming circuit where you can basically go back and any hang-ups you've got, any psychological problems, any mental problems, you could kind of go back, review your life. I think that's kind of possibly what they mean by the Akashic record, is that you have this perception. I mean, when I've had a few very intense psilocybin trips, especially in the summer of 2018. I did a series of like 5 or 6, which really shook me to the core of my being and actually caused this channel to come into being. But it does wear off. I was reading in Sex, Drugs, Magic. Sex, Drugs, and Magic by Robert Anton Wilson. I'm a fiend for Robert Anton Wilson at the moment because he comes at things from a just a rationalist standpoint. There's I see so many magicians on YouTube who are basically just swapping the religion of their parents, believing in omnipotent as Zen would say, Jewish zombies floating about in space. That stuff just seems so silly to me. And they seem to be saying, okay, Baal, oh, Baal visited me tonight. And, they're treating them like they were gods. And it's just another form of religiosity. And that's not where I'm at. I do believe magic is absolutely effective and absolutely proven, but it's sorting the wheat from the chaff. And hopefully that's what I will be doing with my friends from the Lost Word podcast. Baz is here, Sam, Davey, Brandon. We all have a very different take on things, but I think that's how you really get, if everybody just agrees with everyone and says, yeah, that's it, it's God. And, how could there possibly be an anthropomorphic God who is just like a man, but he's judging us and beg demanding and begging that we give him our energy? That is Ialdabaoth. That's the archon of the Gnostics. So how long have I been going? I don't know if this has been a particularly successful stream, but I kind of had to break my duck and not have to rely on Baz and Davey and Sam and Brandon to hold me up when I blank on ideas and stuff. And I had noticed, because of various life stresses, after being a heroin addict for 20 plus years, it's very hard to settle into a stable sort of everyday consciousness. You're always searching for that extra thing. I think humans have a built-in need for transcendence, and in some ways, I got the transcendence, but then heroin made me not need transcendence, not need anything. It makes life very simple. It cancels out all equations, and all you do is score, consume, score, consume. Very destructive, but it, it caught me in its web for many years. And now I don't have the heroin, and I only have a tiny amount. I'm on like 2 mils of Suboxone, 4 milligrams of diazepam. Never managed to quite break that. Don't know when I'm ever going to break that. But I found I was relying more and more on alcohol, and it tends to, like just now, I've had like 2 glasses of wine, but towards the end of the last cycle, I was coming home after work, buying like 4 beers, 2 gin and tonics, 2 bottles of wine, just in case. And then I'd end up drinking them all in one night. And then I'd be like fucking steaming on live streams. And hey, Prospero, one of my oldest and most loyal subscribers, thank you so much for showing up. But that is showing me how far I am off the magical target. Hey, Sunshine and Sophia, long time no see. So, you know, what another thing that freed me quite a lot was hearing two people that I respect very much, Alkistis Dimich and Peter Gray from what do you call them again, Scarlet Imprint. And they were saying how people on YouTube tend to assume the mantle of experts because if you're talking at a camera, you feel like you've got to be an expert in something. I readily admit, and I think the rest of the Lost Word podcast admit that we are not experts at all. We are just seekers, and we are trying to find an honest way out of this. Philip Breer, that's an interesting question. Have I considered going to an iboga retreat clinic? I have considered going to like regular opiate withdrawal clinics, but it would just, it would just. I need to be working. I need to. I've got a relationship. In that relationship, there are children. I'm kind of becoming a bit of a surrogate father to those kids. So I just can't take 2-3 months out of my life to do that. But a very good friend of this channel, again, one of my first subscribers, offered me the chance. I'm not naming him. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this. I don't think anyone would guess who it was. But he actually offered me the chance to go on an all expenses paid to South America to do the ayahuasca experience, videotape it, and kind of report back and make a documentary about it. But I just could not at this time commit because I'm on Suboxone and diazepam, and when you take mushrooms or any hallucinogenic substance, it just rips those substances out of wherever they are in your brain. So you end up pretty strung out by the end of it. And if I was in some hut in a South American jungle, I'm not sure I could actually take it. When I was doing the psilocybin experiments, it was in my friend's cottage in the wilds of Scotland, and there were cozy rugs, and there was come down equipment which I would need. But I think my main thrust in this new year is to somehow take Robert Anton Wilson's work on sex, drugs, consciousness, and magic and try and filter it into how I've experienced these things. Because you could look at the history of religion and the history of samadhi and these union with God experiences and pretty much all paranormal experiences and put them down to uh, either accidental triggering of these advanced circuits or deliberate triggering with hallucinogenic drugs, psychedelic drugs, or even like drugs like cocaine, cannabis. I am an advocate of drugs, just not heroin. Heroin is the only thing that I've come across that's physically addictive in a very, very destructive way. Even cocaine, when I was selling crack cocaine, I was smoking tons of it a day, and you kind of think you're addicted because you just live for your next pipe. But as soon as you get away from it for like a few hours, you come down and you just think, oh well, it's fine. Heroin is the killer. But heroin also has some interesting side effects, uh, especially when you're in withdrawal. Right, so I think I'll wrap up in like about 8 minutes. So I'm not sure if I'll even keep this up because honestly, every time I put up a live stream, I lose subscribers because people think I'm not fucking listening to that boy anymore. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, and he's always drunk all the time. Where did you come up with the name Saroth the Mage? Okay, Mark the Sharkig. I came up with the name Saroth the Mage because in about 2007, 2008, when I was coming off heroin and the really dodgy, addictive drugs. When you come off these drugs, you get a massive high. Your endorphins are like racing, and you feel like it's kind of a born again experience. So I started weirdly channeling, not, it wasn't a planned thing, it just kind of happened spontaneously. And I got the name Saroch through a channel. So that was Saroc. But as we went further into the channels, me and a female friend of mine, it's a long. I think I've explained it in other videos, but it became very important. The male aspect with Thoth, the female aspect was Isis. So we kind of mushed them together, and we got Thosis. So then it became Saroth instead of Sarok, and then the mage just kind of actually came from the psilocybin trip just before the summer solstice of 2018, where at first it was a very, very heavy trip, a very dark trip. It felt like I'd been plunged into like a dark, cold ocean. And there was these skeletal fish-like kind of creatures who were offering me deals very confusing because I think my own idea of the astral plane was quite confused then. In the course of that trip, which lasted 3 or 4 hours, it really, that's what I like about mushrooms. It gives you a chance to, hey, Sam, how's it going, man? It gave me, a DMT flash is like seconds, and you really don't, you get a glimpse of that other world, but you don't get a chance to actually figure anything out. But with high dose psilocybin, you actually have to wade through all your psychic detritus, and it can pull you down. That, I think that's why bad trips happen, is you get overwhelmed with these feelings, and you're still going up, 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 and it's like, oh, one of your rocket boosters doesn't fire, and you're so I struggled for an hour, just drowning in this astral soup where all the occult learning and everything was just being battered against me. I felt presences, felt gods and goddesses, demons and demon, everything. But eventually I managed to climb through physical movement, through sound, like making a clear sound and humming. I was literally, you know, the way we set it up is there's a temple, and then the kind of babysitter sits in the other room. So you're not conscious of them. So you can just let it all go. Quilts on the floor, lots of furry, soft fabrics, gentle music if you wanted, but I prefer silence, darkness, maybe just one candle, some incense burning, and you sink or swim. So eventually I clawed my way through and I'll just consult my notes here. This is where so the fifth circuit, which we access with mild yoga and dope, grass, weed, wild cabbage, holistic neurosomatic circuit. But the interesting one is the collective neurogenetic circuit. And these are deliberately scientific names because I think Robert Anton Wilson was coming from that place where he wanted to sound scientific. But it's basically, there is something about high dose psilocybin, or I've never had it on acid, to be honest. I just don't, I don't like acid. But on mushrooms, you get this feeling that you are looking into your own DNA, like you've got a massively raised perspective, and you can almost see your life in 2 dimensions. So it's like a flat surface, and with timelines all along it. And I saw myself at the end of my life as this grizzled old sort of Viking warrior. That's why I've got other, what do you call them, runes tattooed on me, because that's what I saw. And I even drew a picture of the future me, and it kind of looks like I do now, except from a bit older, and my beard was longer. And yeah, and that's when it said, you will be Saroth the Mage, you will start a YouTube channel. It's going to be a massive success, which hasn't quite happened yet. It's been going for a year and a half, and I've only got 600. In fact, I lost a subscriber tonight. How do you explain that? But yeah. So just to let you know, my focus for this year's videos will be to, you know, come to grips with the fact that magic does work, but it doesn't rely on supernatural entities or things that are outside the human realm of consciousness, although I do not dismiss the idea that there are other consciousnesses in the universe. Another feature on those psilocybin trips was I did encounter entities. I encountered a mantis being, who had a little tiny, like, miniature blue cloak, which is a very strange detail. And he just wanted to observe the trip, and that all seemed perfectly normal. And I also saw, like, humanoid lion beings on the deck of a spaceship in like kind of Star Wars sort of how would you describe it, spandex kind of outfits. So, are these archetypes or are these actual spiritual entities that live out there that are way beyond, because we're not much more than chimpanzees, really. For all the philosophy in the world, all the maths, all the physics, we're really not that smart. We've got many hundreds of thousands of years of evolution before we can even touch another galaxy or another star system or another species. So, we're on our own. But I do believe, as the great Terence McKenna stated again and again, that the psychedelics are where it's at for lazy people who do not and cannot. I have to work. How can I devote 8 hours a day to meditating, doing rituals, lighting candles, breathing exercise, pranayama, asana? I just can't do it. I need the shortcuts, babies. So, what are you going to do? Ombudsman Wilson. Happy to meet you. So, I think it's been reasonably successful tonight. 17 people in live chat, only 13 thumbs up. So, yeah, before I go, I will recommend, we are kind of the Dank Alliance. CW Chant, I would rather we called it what was it? The party people. No, I think Dank Alliance is just fine. Most of us do smoke weed. Most of us have had interesting experiences with consciousness expansion. Yes, Baz Lyons. And there's so much more to that trip as well. I might have to go back to my, because I wrote it up in a WordPress blog. But then when I read back my writing from even 4 years ago, it's like kind of embarrassingly not my voice or something. I don't know. Oh yeah, 16 now. Well done, guys. I do take vigorous notes after my trips, but I've always said that the cut up method expresses a trip far better than just a narrative, because there is time stops, language stops. That's the thing about I really will. My next live stream, I think I'll really try and nail down this 8 circuit Timothy Leary, Robert Anton Wilson idea, because it's so fascinating and it's so full of potential. It explains why we do certain things, why we're caught in certain patterns and we can't break out of them. There's like hardwired stuff in us, like our sexual imprints, our social, economic. Well, I'm not going to go too much further on that because I need to do more research. But the 4 future circuits, which Robert Anton Wilson postulates, are there perhaps to get us into space and beyond. I do believe that yes, Diary Dog Fiend Baz, that is my blog. But I wouldn't disavow what I've written there, but I need to do better. I really do need to pull my creative socks up. Word Pro. Just if you Google Philip Diary of a Dog Fiend, just Google it. I think you can get there that way. So, any closing questions or statements? Philip Blair, thanks again. He seems to be the prime mover and shaker behind the Dank Alliance, a group of open-minded skeptics, I would say, who are, because I see Become a Living God and all those dudes as pretty much no better than Cody Good, David Wilcock. That's harsh, but I do believe they are fucking kidding themselves. Yeah, Scratchy, if you can bring the brew, come right on over, man. So yeah, thank you. That was actually not too bad. I hate live streaming, but I just thought I needed to do it, and I'm kind of glad I did. So thank you, Mark the Shark. Thank you, Ombudsman Wilson. That was my mum. I'm a Wilson on my maternal side. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Philip Blair. Thank you, Sunshine on Sophia. Thank you, Scratchy. Thank you, Prospero. Yeah, you'll be getting some chaos art. Thank you, Jasmine. Oh, Jasmine just posted the link to my WordPress blog. Thank you very much, Jasmine. Okay, Johnny, thank you. See, that wasn't so bad. Okay, I'll quit while I'm still ahead. Thank you, guys. Good night. Don't believe the hype.